could you tell us what brings you to Moscow of all places, especially during the middle of a war?
Well, I was in Moscow many years ago, in the year 1979, because I came invited by the International Political Science Association to deliver a paper. And then I could not come back to Moscow, and I was always very much interested in, not only in Moscow, but in Russian life, for many reasons, right? Because I have a very acute sense of what Russia has done in terms of keeping our basic civilizational values still on its feet. And that if Russia, and in that case Soviet Union, had failed in the attempt to stop the Nazi invasion, today everybody will be speaking in German and saluting in this way. So our freedom, in great measure, was due to the heroism of the people of this country. And so I am very, very moved when I talk about this matter, because when I was here in 1979, I had the chance to talk to some very old Soviet soldiers, Russians, Ukrainian, and from other nationalities, with the help of a translator. And they told me really fantastic stories of heroism and so on. So, well, I didn't have the chance to return afterwards. Once that the Soviet Union collapsed, the new government was not, I didn't know nobody. And now here, apparently, there are a few people who know me, who know my work, and they decided to invite me to the Multipolarity Forum, because I am writing and researching on this issue.
Well, now many Russians believe that Russia is right now, again, just like in World War II, defending the world against a sort of new form of fascism, a sort of globalist, liberal, anti-human fascism. Do you believe there's truth to that, or is that a lie?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Russia is playing a fundamental role in avoiding to fall in the worst of the dictatorships, as today we can see, for instance, in countries like Israel. You see, the neo-fascist and racist governments are spreading very, very fast from all over the world. And Russia, which is victim of an aggression, because what I was saying from the very beginning, on the basis of American sources, was not my, because I was not here and I cannot read Russian, but I do read very well other languages, and especially English. And when I studied the official documents of the Pentagon or the State Department and so on, I found quite clearly that the idea that the American policymakers have is to bleed Russia to death. This is the idea, and not only the idea, it was written on a white paper, the idea. If you look at the, for instance, Paul Wolfowitz's memorandum of the year February 1992, I guess, in which he said, doesn't matter that Russia is no longer communist. Russia is still very powerful and is and will be forever a major obstacle to the US policy in Central Europe and in Eurasia. And therefore we can try to fragment Russia, to divide Russia as in many pieces as it is possible. And among other things, forcing Russia to go to war against any of the enemies.
Now, people like Paul Wolfowitz, do you believe that their intention was to make sure that America stays powerful, or did they have some sort of globalist mission? Because as an American, I can see that from the end of communism, our country just gets poorer and more divided and more broken.
Yeah.
Instead of being this great center of a world empire, we fall apart due to this.
Yeah.
So what is their actual objective? Make America powerful and great, or something else, something maybe more globalist?
I see it's a very good question. I think that for people like Wolfowitz and the hawks, American hawks, they know very well that if Russia is strong, they cannot impose their rules not only in Europe but worldwide. And so the resurrection of the American power has an intermediate stage, which is the destruction, or if not the destruction, to put Russia on its knees, okay? Ponerla sobre sus rodillas, as we say in Spanish. And that would open the road for reinforcements of the American role in the world and the reunification of a country around all this Make America Great Again of Donald Trump and so on. But the precondition of that is that Russia has to be wiped out. This is what happened. And then you see, not only Wolfowitz 30 years ago and more, if you read the papers of the foundation, the RAND Corporation, the RAND Corporation, the report Overextending and Unbalancing Russia, this is the title of the report, you can check that in the internet, in which they say exactly that we may force Russia to go to war. And they say in one of the chapters devoted to military matters, they say that in order to do that, we have to place lethal weapons in the border between Ukraine and Russia, so Russia will have no other choice than to respond invading Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And that will be the beginning of a war that will be bleeding Russia to death. Yeah. This was written there.
Okay, but why were they so sure that Russia would lose? Because of the sanctions, or because the entire strength of NATO could be sort of given to the Ukrainian forces?
The two things, the role of the sanctions, which had a paradoxical effect. Russia is much stronger now with the sanctions than before. NATO has become, was always a criminal organization. Seen from Latin America, we have no doubt. NATO is a bunch of criminals with an official visit card, and that's all. But also there is a third element which was very important, which is the sense that Russian population is not as good as the Western European or an American. There is a racist component. Well, you people are slaves, and the Slavos, no? The Slavonic, I don't know how they say in English, and they are not people good for war. They are lazy, they are poorly organized. There is an underestimation, fantastic underestimation of Russia, which is something which came very far behind in modern European history, okay? The idea that Russia is, population of Russia is of inferior quality. It's a racist argument, which is untenable under the light of the historical experience, but you know, people, the historical experience, they don't pay any attention at all. So they saw that the Russians will be easily defeated when NATO would join with the Ukrainian force, and that they would come up to Moscow. That's a fantastic underestimation, which explains this American behavior.
Now, you mentioned that NATO has had a really negative effect on Latin America. Now, I've heard many stories about how the CIA has tried to overthrow, kill, assassinate people in Latin America, but not much about NATO in Latin America. Could you tell us about some of these potential crimes?
Well, to begin with, NATO is supposedly, because we could not inspect that, establishing a nuclear deposit in the Falkland Islands, in the Malvinas Islands. I say Falkland, they are Malvinas, no? But if I say Malvinas, many people will not understand. This is an Argentine island which were taken over by the British, expelling the original Argentine population in 1833, and it is there. And after the war between Argentina and the United Kingdom in 1982, then there was a very strong deployment of military forces and the construction of a military base, very important, in Mount Pleasant, in Malvinas, yes, and with personnel and staff, military staff of OTAN. Why? Because it's a strategic location, controlling the access to the Antarctica, controlling the access to the stream of the continent, which you can go from the Atlantic to the Pacific. In case the Panama, suppose the Panama, the only way is there. In addition to the formidable submarine riches in that area, including oil, gas, and of course all kinds of fish and etc. And that one thing. The second thing is that most of NATO appears in disguise as American training exercises with local armies or navies in Latin America. You don't know who they are. In fact, there is, yes, it's an American cruiser, but in which you have 20 naval officers of Norway, Sweden, and Germany coming there because nobody inspects exactly what is in the ship. So NATO, but nobody talks about NATO in Latin America so far. But now they are starting to talk because of the renewed expansion of the military in Latin America with the change of the chieftaincy, the leadership of the Southern Command, with Laura Richardson. Laura Richardson, which is currently the leader, is a very vocal person, which talks too much, and she has said that we have to take care of our riches. She said, our riches that we have in this nice neighborhood in which we have been living in full harmony during 2 centuries. She said so exactly in the moment in which the doctrine Monroe Doctrine has the 200th anniversary. And he said, Monroe, etc., we have lived in complete harmony, and we should prevent malign characters or people, noble people, coming to take our own resources. So Americans consider that the lithium in Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile is America, as the Venezuelan oil. And you know who are the usual suspects? China, Russia, and Iran. Yeah. So we have to keep them out of the region. This is what she said.
Well, and speaking of someone who may be, let's just say, fight against the Russians and Chinese in the region, you guys in Argentina have a new president. Now, I don't know much about Argentina, so I hear 2 stories. On the one hand, we see Milei as this guy who comes in and says, there's lots of wasteful government spending, we have a ton of problems, especially our currency. Let's get rid of the spending, get rid of horrible, useless things in the government like diversity training and climate nonsense, and spend money on important things. That sounds good. Then he says, we need to depend on the US dollar, we need to orient Argentina completely to Washington, we're not going to be in BRICS, and Russia and China are bad. This is weird. Yeah. I don't understand this. Who is this new president of yours? What is he trying to do?
The second one you mentioned, the one who longs to be to make Argentina the 51st state of the United States, who wants the dollarization of the economy, who wants to reduce governmental expenditures, but fighting very, very fiercely against, for instance, the salaries of the workers or the pensions of the old people. You know, Argentina has a peculiarity which is very strange, in not only Latin America. More than 92% of our elderly receive some kind of pension, something which is not true, not even in the United States, you see? And that pension is a state system pension, like it is in Germany or in Sweden, etc. And so he wants to remake Argentina, slashing all that, condemning that population to starvation, total starvation. So it's a reactionary he's anarcho-capitalism. He's a reader of Murray Rothbard. You know Murray Rothbard, who says that the markets are good, they are wonderful, that if there is something wrong with the markets, it's because there is the state intervening, regulating the markets. So he said, no state, we have to destroy the state, we have to slash all the government expenditures. And then he has some ideas we have not any relationship with the reality. Talking, everybody in the world runs surplus budgets. It's not true. I was looking at the figures in the last 10 years. Only 6 or 7 countries are running the countries with a governmental surplus. Not the United States, of course, which has a huge. The Japanese, they have a deficit of more than 200% of the Japanese GNP. But he said, well, look at Luxembourg, look at 2 or 3 small countries in Europe, which are not real countries, except, I don't know, Denmark, he says, is one example, and Norway. Small countries, small population, very rich resources, especially in the case of Norway. And he's a true believer. He's a very, very dangerous person, insulting everybody, saying the worst, the more coarse wordings against enemies. He also has said terrible things against Pope Francis. So, is among other things, is a person who has a severe mental disorder. Okay, severe mental disorder, because you cannot understand how a chief of state behaves like he behaved, for instance, in Davos, in which he made an absurd speech, in which has not a single data supporting what he said. It was all an elucubration. And in addition, he's a person who has very strange beliefs. He receives economic advices from his dog, who died 8 years ago, but to which he communicates through a medium. So we are in the worst hands possible.
Well, one thing is, if the elections in Argentina were fair, why did people vote for him?
Because of the enormous frustration created by the last 8 years of government. One by the right, by government by Mauricio Macri, the other by the government of Alberto Fernandez and Cristina Fernandez, which realmente failed in a critical issue, which was inflation control. You know, you cannot win the election if you have an inflation rate of 10-15% per month. Look, Jim, per month, which pulverized, demolished the incomes of, I would say, 80% of the population. And so people who were very, very in favor of Cristina and so on, voted against because they were absolutely angry. And Mr. Sergio Massa, who was the officialist candidate, was a guy who was in charge of the Ministry of Economy. But he demonstrated that he was not able to control inflation. So people voted for him. And in addition, there was another factor. He didn't win the first round of the election, the presidential election. He went to the ballot, he was second. But the right, who was there, rapidly joining forces with these fascists, and then he won the election. But my forecast is that he will have a very, very rough time to staying in power, because the enormous level of social frustration in these days in Argentina, especially, you know, I would say 80% of the population, the 80% with lower incomes or vulnerable job insertion, etc., are very, very angry against him, and probably there will be a sort of social explosion or just an eruption of discontent, and he may have to step out of the government.
Well, then my last question for you. If inflation in Argentina was the real core issue, Milei comes to power, has this situation gotten better or worse?
No, it's still very bad, let's see. He is a complete, a totally irresponsible demagogue. And though he said before the election, we are running in the possibility of having an inflation of 50% for the year January. Well, finally, the inflation in January was, let's say, 25%. And he said, well, that's a great success. And of course, many people say, look, your 50% was just baloney. We are now 25%. The last of the inflation rate of the last administration was 15. So we are 10% worse now. But okay, what happened? All the ideological and media machinery of the right are trying to sustain Milei for a while to enable him to do the dirty job that no other government can do. That means the suppression of labor legislation, suppression of the state pension system and so on. And then he will be kicked out of government. But the problem is that popular reaction is starting to be very, very strong, especially in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and the things are going to be worse in the months of March and April. My forecast is that a perfect political torment is gathering, and that torment will explode by early May or mid-May, and I may be wrong. Of course, you know, all these kind of prognosis always have many qualifications, but if the situation continues like it is today, it is very unlikely that we can avoid a social estallido social, a social outburst of protest, completely anomic, because there is no organization able to provide a leadership in that. But the same happened in the year 2001, and we got rid of the government of Fernando de la Rúa, and there were 5 presidents in 1 week because nobody could have this fierro caliente, we say, this hot piece of iron in his hand. So this is my prediction, and I hope that he may go out, because he's making an enormous danger. You mentioned BRICS. BRICS for us was absolutely a blessing, and he said we are not going to be in the BRICS because there is communist leadership there. Lula is considered a communist, of course Xi Jinping a communist, and even the Democrats in the US are regarding us sort of collectivist, useful idiots, as they used to say, useful idiots of the collectivists. So you cannot run a country with those ideas without producing a major disaster. You can, but the result will be a major disaster, and I think that people will react to avoid that.